Karen in Atlanta, Adi in Austin, Taylor in West Virginia, Miriam in Maryland, Jody in Atlanta. Welcome, everyone. All right, so it's 7:31, so we're just going to go ahead and get started because we have so much content for tonight. My name is Jocelyn Resnick. I am a life and recovery coach. I am so excited to be here with all of you and the Blue Dove Foundation, and Gabby is going to introduce herself in a moment, and just so happy to have you guys joining us from all over the country, which is truly incredible. Eating disorders are such a big topic. We're seeing a high prevalence right now, especially during COVID. And just through my own journey, I have realized there's this huge connection to the Jewish community and the Jewish population. And I wanted to do an event to bring awareness to all of you and to really engage everyone in this conversation. So many women and men, eating disorders impact everyone, regardless of age, gender, socioeconomic status, religious sect. They impact everyone, and the conversation needs to happen. And it goes so far beyond just eating disorders. There's a whole component of food and body shame that we're seeing, and just bringing awareness is such a big piece of it. So Gabby and I have gone through the questions that you all submitted when you registered, and we're going to cover as much as we can. We have incredible speakers tonight who will be sharing their story, that are going to be sharing their experiences, talking more about what we're seeing now in the pandemic, how you can be a support to somebody who's struggling, and really excited to hear more from them and to hear their stories. And I also want to let you all know that we are going to cover as much as we can, but we are scratching the surface. So this is a much longer conversation. There are so many layers involved when we talk about eating disorders in Judaism. And I want you all to know that our speakers are available for communication and for answer questions after this event ends. And you'll be receiving an email with our contact information, how to get in touch with us, how to learn more from us, in terms of also other resources in terms of supporting somebody with an eating disorder. So all of that is coming to you after the event is over. So just so much awareness, so many tools to support you all. And I am going to turn it over to Gabby.
Awesome. Thank you, Jocelyn. It is so wonderful to partner with you. It is incredible to see the number of people that are joining us tonight from across the country. We are live on Facebook, but we are only sharing the speakers. I want to make sure that everyone understands that who's here with us, who have all agreed to share their remarks publicly, and it will be available online. As Jocelyn said, my name is Gabby Spat. I'm the Executive Director of the Blue Dove Foundation. We are so glad to bring awareness to this topic tonight. It is a topic that touches people everywhere, as Jocelyn said. And some might wonder, what is Quieting the Silence and why are we doing this? And Quieting the Silence is a platform that the Blue Dove Foundation developed to help individuals and organizations create programs and events focusing on mental health and substance use. Our goal is to offer members of the community a chance to come together, to share stories and experiences, and help open up the conversations around different mental health topics. In our work, we have found that hearing personal stories of struggles and loss directly from those living through them makes a stronger impact and helps to foster new perspective, personal connections, ideas, and hope. And we hope by sharing stories, we can show others that they're not alone. There are people who have similar experiences that you can connect with and that you can learn from. And this will help us to continue to eliminate the shame and stigma that many feel when it comes to mental illness and addiction, and asking for the support that one needs to come out on the other side. So we're going to start tonight, as we start any Blue Dove Foundation program that we do, by hearing some words of wisdom, thought, insight by a Jewish clergy member. Tonight, we are so fortunate to have a friend of mine, a colleague, a neighbor, Rabbi Lauren Lapidus of the Temple in Atlanta, Georgia, who will share her thoughts on Judaism's connection to mental health. And then after Rabbi Lapidus is done, we will move into our program, which will include our different speakers this evening, Jocelyn, who you met, Joanna, Chelsea, and Lucy. So I am so glad you are here. We are all so glad you are here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Lapidus now. So thank you, Rabbi Lauren. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Okay, there it works. It's almost a dream come true to be able to apply the mute feature to the rabbi. Don't let the temple hear that happened. Good evening to everyone. Gabby, thank you to you and to Blue Dove for the invitation to be here for an issue that I think needs to be talked about as much as possible in our community. When we talk about eating disorders and those who struggle with them, it's kind of like talking about Jews in the Jewish community. It's hard to summarize in one group, one monolith, what that experience is like. We know that for eating disorders, they take on different forms. It can sometimes be very hard to diagnose and categorize. And when we talk about Judaism, we know that old joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So I want to own that I cannot speak to every denomination of Judaism and every understanding. I cannot speak to every experience of disordered eating and struggles with eating disorders. But I do want tonight to begin by making a few observations of a couple places where we can connect things within Judaism to relevant pieces of talking about eating disorders, especially for those of us who are looking to support those who are going through this struggle. We are coming up on a series of holidays that can be summed up, like most holidays, as follows. They tried to kill us or oppress us. We survived. Let's eat. For those who struggle with eating disorders, to come to the excess of Purim or to the holiday of Passover, when so much attention is focused on what we eat, there can be a challenge. But I think to only talk about the immediate experience of the holidays misses what I think is a broader concern. That food, that body image, that many things that can be challenging for those struggling with eating disorders are embedded in Jewish culture and experience. So I want to talk about 3 areas, 3 observations. First, a focus on food. Going back to the Torah, we have the categorization of food into permitted and forbidden. And whether we adhere to any standard of kashrut, keeping kosher or not, there is a framework that food is an expression of identity. Some foods are forbidden, and that's not because they taste bad. On Passover, this becomes more universally understood because more of us are avoiding leavening and chametz, the leavened bread and related products. And I want you to think for a second about how much attention goes into Passover food and what we can and cannot have and cook. Then add in other holidays and think about Shabbat, where there's a focus on abundance and sweetness and on a celebration oriented around food. But then we have the other experience, which is Yom Kippur. And I cannot tell you how often people start with their report of Yom Kippur by telling me exactly how many hours they fasted, as though that is the mark of a meaningful experience. So think about if I took away the Jewish part of that, if I took away keeping kosher, that sounds at times like the experience some struggling with eating disorders may have. The categorization of food into permitted and forbidden, and also the concern that exists in the Jewish community of the appearance of what we are eating and what others will think. And whether one is struggling with abundance or struggling with restriction, we can see places where the categorization of food and the experience of food at holidays and other times and the daily experience of kashrut can prove challenging and triggering. Another aspect of Jewish tradition is to think about Jewish views of the body. Bodies, like food, get categorized in Jewish tradition into permitted and forbidden at certain times and in certain ways, with no desire to exclude those who are male identified. The truth of it is this applies more to women in our tradition. Tzniut, modesty in our Jewish tradition, sees women's bodies fundamentally as tempting, potentially dangerous. And so women have to cover parts of themselves up according to standards set by men to protect men from their weakness and their temptation. So it sets up kind of an adversarial relationship within one's body. Parts of us are forbidden, parts of us are dangerous, parts of us are mysterious. So imagine then for those who struggle with body image, who already have an adversarial relationship with their bodies, who already see themselves as challenging, mysterious, dangerous even, to be in a communal context where others may see it the same way. And regardless of how we feel about modesty, just think about the idea that there is a legislation of one's body and certain parts of it that are being judged by others. How can we then expect that to be easy for one who already has a strong voice of self-judgment and critique? So tzniut is actually an interesting topic for me because as a rabbinical student, I studied it and redefined it in my rabbinic thesis in a liberal way. The focus on the image we want to present to others, not following the patriarchal system and all that. But that's not necessarily easier for those who are struggling with eating disorders and distorted body image. Because how do we know what we want to present to the world when we can't see ourselves accurately, when we cannot see ourselves as others see us? How can we have pride in our bodies, believe we are B'Tselem Elohim, made in the image of God, when we look at ourselves and feel voices and feelings of loathing or shame? So the categorization and attitudes around food and bodies can already present some challenges in the Jewish community. And I'm not saying causation, but rather exacerbation of what a person with an eating disorder may already be feeling and experiencing. And so without support and a recognition of how those communal norms and practices can be triggering, it can become a very lonely and anxious place. But I want to come to the third area that ultimately is going to, I think, be comforting, I hope, which is not just specific to eating disorders, but almost any mental illness or any challenge with addiction. And it's the challenge of misconception and associated shame. How many times do we hear from family members and friends of those who are struggling with eating disorders? Well, why won't they just eat? Why can't they just stop eating? I don't understand why this is so hard. How many times have these words been said by well-meaning family or friends of those struggling, assuming they're even aware of the struggle in the first place? There is a misperception that the person with disordered eating is choosing this, but those with personal experience know that no one would willingly choose this. There is a lot of belief that an eating disorder is about food, when we know it is much more tied up into emotional well-being, a desire for control, body image, other triggers, and related experiences, so many aspects of our lives. There's also this belief that eating disorders can be cured. I would say, like other mental health issues and other addiction, our goal isn't to cure, it's to manage. How can we completely quiet all the voices in our minds and souls? Well, I imagine it's easier to have the target of managing them. While we can put these experiences farther and farther in our past with recovery and structure and support, the truth of it is they could never fully go away entirely. They just might speak softer and softer as time goes on. The tradition in our creation story gives us some helpful images. The first is, as I mentioned before, B'Tselem Elohim. We are each made in the image of God. I recognize that for those on this call who are struggling with eating disorders, or perhaps not with a specific diagnosis, but a difficult relationship with body or food, that sometimes that may be a hard idea to hold on to and to really believe. But if we can think about ourselves as created in the divine image, that each of us is sacred, it invites us that even in the moments we can't offer ourselves love, that perhaps God is there and able to offer that compassion and love as well. We also have in the creation tradition the idea that each of us is created with the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and the evil inclination. Think about it more as the voices we want to listen to and the voices we struggle not to listen to. We each have to learn to live with the temptations that exist, the voices in our minds that lead us in the places we don't want to go. And the truth of it is, we can never be fully in the Yetzer HaTov. We are always going to hear the voices in the other direction. And so for those who feel like there are good days and there are bad days, the truth of it is that's true for each human being in some way. The pull into the good and the struggle to try to quiet the voices that pull us into the places we don't want to go. But within all of it is the capacity for renewal and change. Embedded within Judaism are notions of teshuvah, of repentance, of forgiveness that we can offer to ourselves and to one another, the capacity for change, and as we come towards Passover, the capacity for renewal. So my prayer for each person who is on this call, who is struggling themselves, for those who feel almost helpless and just want to extend support and help to a friend or family member, let us remember that there are going to be good days and bad days, the Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara, that we will have times where we are able to lean into where we want to be, and there are going to be times we'll be pulled back. And that's okay, that we can offer one another love, we can offer one another the promise of renewal, the promise of healing, and the promise of hope.
My name is Lucy Bowman, and I'm a junior at Old Dominion University with a major in psychology and a minor in Jewish studies. Outside of school, I'm a published author, and I enjoy writing about eating disorder recovery with an interest combining Judaism and mental health. Recovering from an eating disorder and going through my own treatment inspired me to want to become a therapist in the future. I want my future clients to know that full recovery is possible. I grew up in Virginia Beach, and since I was young, I experienced sensory issues and anxiety. However, I didn't really start focusing on my body and weight until I was about 7, when I started to notice that what I ate could have a relationship on my body and a number on a scale. When I turned 13, I started going to the gym, and from there, I became obsessed with numbers, how much I worked out, and fixating on my body. Although exercise can have benefits for some, for me, it became an unhealthy and dangerous obsession. When I started high school, I joined a cross-country team because I wanted to make friends. I was struggling to nourish myself, plus overexerting my body led to a concussion after I passed out in PE October of my freshman year. That was when my parents first realized I had an eating disorder, and that just started a winding road ahead of treatment. I started going to outpatient therapy. However, there weren't any clinicians in my area that had any experience treating eating disorders, so outpatient treatment proved not to be very successful. My eating disorder continued to affect my daily life. I could not concentrate in school due to being malnourished, and I struggled with my mental health. I felt depressed and isolated. Eventually, my family and I realized I needed more help. March of my sophomore year of high school, I went to inpatient treatment in Baltimore, Maryland. At the time, Baltimore was the closest to our area with a specialized inpatient treatment center for eating disorders. I was beyond a point of digging myself out on my own, and I am fortunate enough that I had the access to the treatment I needed. I medically restored, meaning I gained weight and my health stabilized, to the point where I could live outside a hospital, but I struggled internally just as much. I saw an outpatient therapist who did not have experience in eating disorders, as that was what was available in my town at that time. I ended up relapsing. At first, the decline was slow and it started to pick up. I tried to sustain being back at school and everyday life. I was in an international baccalaureate program at my high school, and I didn't want to take any more time off to go to treatment. I struggled with the same problems as before. However, I felt so much more ashamed because I thought I should be better. I was convinced that something was just wrong with me. And the thing about recovering is it is challenging, and relapse isn't a sign of failure, but a sign that something is missing and that something more is needed. At the end of my senior year, my doctor thought it would be beneficial to start seeing an eating disorder dietitian for the first time, as I had been declining significantly. She monitored my food intake, weight, and would help improve my relationship with food. I wanted to break away from my eating disorder, but still held on with so much fear. Eating disorders serve a purpose in one's life, and it can feel intimidating to step into the unknowns of the recovery when an eating disorder just feels so much more known. After I graduated high school in 2018, I had a job as a camp counselor at URJ Six Points SciTech Academy East, which I was so excited about. When I was there, I loved it. I felt a sense of home I had never felt before, making leaving all that more crushing. I had to leave because I was struggling and my health was declining. It was one of the hardest losses for me and one in the first I had ever experienced as a consequence of having an eating disorder. It was the first moment that I realized that living with an eating disorder isn't sustainable. It helped me realize that I wanted to change. I went home and worked with my dietitian on gaining weight and trying to make more progress in recovery in order to go to college. It was my top choice and I really wanted to go. However, I knew I wasn't completely ready. I went anyways because I was convinced that I thought I could somehow make it work. And I know now that holding on to any part of the eating disorder never truly works. When I got to college, I found my schedule consumed by appointments off campus and classes. I couldn't go out, and it was hard to make friends when I was afraid to go out to eat with them. The calories written all over the dining hall intimidated me, and I struggled to navigate it on my own. I would get a lot of comments on my body and why I looked and ate the way I did. Although some were well-meaning, commenting on weight loss can often lead to a stronger desire to keep the eating disorder. A few weeks into the semester, I had to leave as my health was extremely compromised. I was told if I didn't leave, my team would send me to treatment without a choice, and so I decided to leave on my own. I went to residential treatment in Northern Virginia. I feared giving up my eating disorder, my body changing, and I was devastated about college. Being in a new place was scary, so I struggled to trust my team and engage in treatment. I came in pretty malnourished, which made it difficult to engage in treatment and make much cognitive progress. Over the course of the year, I got stuck in a cycle. I would get sent to a lower level of care too early, only to be sent back to residential a few weeks later. Then the same thing would happen again. Healing takes time and it's not always linear, and that pattern can be broken. In my admission of July of 2019, which is about 9 months later, something clicked. I knew I couldn't keep going through the cycle as it was absolutely exhausting and felt defeating. I knew I was the only one who could get myself out of it, and I somewhere deep inside I knew I could do it. So I wrote a letter to myself as that was the first assignment I was given, and I promised myself I was going to do everything differently. Meaning I was going to be vulnerable with my team, truly give recovery a chance, and not give up even when things got challenging. I realized that the only way out was through. I signed a letter with, "I know you have it in you to choose recovery and do things differently. From me, who knows you have a spark in you fighting for freedom." After being discharged from residential, I felt motivated. I continued to progress with my therapist and dietitian. When my therapist went on maternity leave, I enrolled in a recovery program online with a recovery coach. I continually progressed in my healing and recovery. I am now proud to declare myself fully recovered. Being recovered is when a person can accept their natural body size and shape without a destructive relationship with food or exercise. It does not portray their health and well-being to alter their body shape. I realized I had no desire to go back to my eating disorder, and that's when I truly realized I had recovered. One thing that helped me was to write things down. I published my first article about Yom Kippur and started publishing more and more of them. I started to also to write my insights on Instagram and created a blog. In October of 2020, I published my first book called The Joss to Becoming, which features many of my journal entries as I progressed in my recovery over the course of a really significant year. And my publication date is actually my recovery anniversary, as that I did it as a gift to myself, like to celebrate my recovery and all my accomplishments. I am really proud of it. And I noticed as I made progress, my writing reflected that. As I wrote in my book, my existence and transformation happened under my hand, and that is something I'm forever proud of. A girl who once had pages filled with thoughts of hating herself turned into hopes, dreams, and revelations, and food became something non-existent in the pages, because like her life, it was just something part of it, not consuming her every thought. You see, her doubts were an echo of her becoming. As she grew, her thoughts grew deeper and she became more sure of herself. She created her new existence, and what she envisioned on paper was right in front of her eyes. Because her doubts of becoming were an echo all along, and the voices in pen and paper felt more authentic than ever before. Today, I'm so happy to be where I am, and how much life feels like so free, even with all the stresses of 2020 and 2021. I'm grateful for all the opportunities I've been given, like my internship for Blue Dove Foundation and Foundation for Jewish Camp, my work with Project Heal, and my job combining all my passions at SciTech. I'm planning to go to grad school for my master's degree to become an eating disorders therapist, so I can give back to a field that has helped me so much and cultivate it in ways that can still grow and make it more accessible, because life without an eating disorder is truly so much better than I imagined, and I want everyone to be able to experience it. I once thought I could never recover, yet here I am living a life I never thought I would, completely free from all eating disorder thoughts. Keep going, because change is possible and full recovery is possible. Your eating disorder isn't something that you have to manage for the rest of your life. You can break free from it, and I truly do believe after recovering that full recovery is possible.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Lapidus and Lucy, for sharing. I just want to highlight some things that Lucy shared. The first piece is how unlinear recovery is. It really is a series of ups and downs and ins and outs and whatnot. And that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It means that you're doing it exactly right. It really just is, it's messy, and that's just part of the healing journey. And also that full recovery is real. And I am not sharing my story tonight, but I am also living proof that it is real and that you can live a life without anxiety around food in your body. It's 100% possible. And my story is in the Quieting the Silence book through the Blue Dove Foundation. And we can definitely provide more information on that as well. So on that note, for those of you who signed on a little later, my name's Jocelyn Resnick. I am a life coach. I've been working with the Blue Dove Foundation. And our next speaker is Chelsea Kronengold. And Chelsea is also an activist and a leader in the eating disorder space. And I am so excited to have her here and to share more of her story. So Chelsea, would love for you to just chime in and just share more of your experience with an eating disorder, with recovery, and in regards to like growing up in the Jewish community and how that played a role for you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I was born and raised in a town called Livingston in New Jersey, which is a predominantly Jewish town, and it's predominantly middle to upper middle class. And so growing up, everyone kind of wanted to be the best of the best. And as we know, that often included being the thinnest possible. And my body shape was never meant to be thin. And I dieted my whole life. And, still, I was always in a heavier body. And basically, doctors would prescribe me with diet and weight loss plans. And I went to weight loss camp my whole life and just this whole cycle. And it wasn't until I started learning more about eating disorders that I realized I had one myself. And then I finally got an official diagnosis for that. And, just like most Jewish people, as I said before, that there's the kind of thin ideal and the pressure to be thin. And for me, it comes from intergenerational. So my grandmother was always dieting. She put my mom on diets when she was younger, and my mom received messages her whole life that her body wasn't good enough, and then trickled down to me, both through nature and nurture. So here I am today, and also in recovery, and happy to be here.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just curious if there was any piece from the Jewish community that tied into to your journey and your healing.
So when I was in treatment, the residential treatment center I went to had a Jewish group, and I participated in that. And my closest friends in treatment also happened to be Jewish and also happened to be in the group. And so we called ourselves like the Jew crew. And, there was really that bonding experience there. And so being Jewish wasn't necessarily part of my journey to get me to treatment, but when I was in treatment, it definitely played a big role in that. And while I did not celebrate Shabbat prior to treatment, while in treatment, my Jew crew and I celebrated Shabbat together. So there was a really healing piece of community involved that was beyond just the treatment experience that you would normally have.
Amazing. And I would love for you to share also just how your experience through treatment, through recovery impacts the work that you do today, because I know that you are also a big activist and are still doing the work. And I think that there are a lot of people watching too that also want to know how they can advocate for recovery.
Yeah, so after seeking treatment, I became a lot more compassionate about other people and other people's journeys. I studied psychology and eating disorders in college. I have my master's in clinical psychology, and I focused my studies on eating disorders. So I do consider myself to be a content expert, but there's just certain things that you can't learn from a book. And that's other people's experiences that are different from mine, and just the valid struggles that come with that. And you were asking about how people can get involved who are, yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm
especially not being a mental health professional. Like, how can people like continue to do this work, spread the word?
So I'm the communications manager for the National Eating Disorders Association. So I have to give a little plug there. And so we do have some volunteer opportunities that do not require you to be an expert, like getting involved in coordinating or being on a committee of a walk, like you've done, Jocelyn. And also, if you're in a good place in your mental health, we do have volunteer and internship opportunities on our helpline for people of all ages. 18 and older, but not just for college students. And I think one of the beautiful things about social media, we talk about the negatives of social media all the time, but I think one of the great things is that you don't have to be an expert to share your story and to find a community there. You don't have to be an influencer, even just writing down your thoughts, using some appropriate hashtags can really make a difference. And you can connect with other people as well who are experiencing similar issues and triumphs as well as issues.
Yeah, and I know that for everyone that's watching, I think all of our speakers have active social media platforms, Instagram platforms, and happy to connect there. But it is such a great way to share your struggle and to just educate also, because I think a lot of people are on social media. So that's one way, as Chelsea mentioned, like being a walk coordinator, hopefully when the pandemic ends, we can have real in-person events again. Blogging also, I think, is another really great way to get involved. Anything else that is coming up for you, Chelsea, that you would like to share? Anything that we missed?
Yeah, so I'll also, in my role with NEDA and promoting NEDA's programs and services, we do have National Eating Disorders Awareness Week coming up at the end of the month. So it's Monday, February 22nd to Sunday, February 28th. And our theme is Everybody Has a Seat at the Table, and we are focusing on marginalized communities. And it's a great way to dip your feet in the eating disorder awareness, whether it's knowledge or activism, since there's a lot of attention on shining the spotlight on eating disorders during that week. And you can learn more at NEDA, N-E-D-A, awareness. So awareness, but there's one A.org.
We can put that link in the chat to make life easier.
Too late to spell.
Yeah. And I actually meant to mention that February, I believe, is Body Image Awareness Month. which is
Mhm.
why we did this event in February in the first place.
Yeah.
But yes, the third week is National Eating Disorders Awareness Week. And there's events happening through NEDA, through other organizations to really put a spotlight on eating disorders and recovery.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Chelsea, for being here. It's been great having you. Again, feel free to continue asking questions. Can everyone follow up with you? Or if
Yeah,
they want to get in
absolutely.
touch? Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Chelsea, you can put your information in the chat. It'll also go out via email after the event is over.
Great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening.
Okay. There's our next speaker. So we have Joanna Candell here now, and Joanna is the founder and executive director of the Alliance for Eating Disorders, and just so thrilled to have you to share more of your story and your journey. And I would love also to shed light more on the COVID impact with eating disorders, and what we're seeing right now. So Joanna, would love for you to just chime right in and just share a little bit more of your story, your journey. I know it's powerful. I'm sure everyone else is ready to hear because it's so powerful. And I would also love for you to share a little bit of your connection to being a child of a Holocaust survivor.
Sure, absolutely, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for having me tonight, specifically to the Blue Dove Foundation for doing this event. I'm so grateful that more and more of these opportunities are coming out, because we know that, when you create conversations and you smash the stigma surrounding um, topics that people don't ordinarily speak about, you create opportunities for people to get help, and then they no longer have to suffer in silence, which I can guarantee you was part of your story, Chelsea's story, Lucy's story. Like so many of us that have experienced eating disorders spent so much time in the darkness and alone. And I think it's so powerful when we can come together and be just honest, and that's where healing happens. So I am someone with lived experience as well. I experienced an eating disorder for over a decade. I consider myself a non-discriminatory eating disorder human, meaning you name it, I did it, and I probably made up a few along the way. And for me, that's something that was really, really powerful was I am the child of a Holocaust survivor. My father was 3.5, at the height of the war, and he narrowly escaped. He was actually on a train headed to Auschwitz, and he narrowly escaped with his life, and was separated from his family. He lived in hiding for about 4 years. And what's really unbelievable is, we know so much about transgenerational trauma, but for me growing up, there was always this extra being in our house, which was the Holocaust. Even though we never spoke about it, we never talked about it, it was always there. So when my parents had me, and both of my parents are immigrants from France. My mother's actually from Northern Africa. My dad is from Paris. They never had opportunities growing up. So when they came here and they had me, they wanted to give me every opportunity that they never had. And so there was a lot of immense pressure, which a lot of children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors actually feel as well. And it was done with love, and my parents didn't have formal education, and so they really wanted me to be a lawyer, a doctor, a nuclear physicist, like you name it. Like they wanted me to be something big. And I actually started dancing at the age of 3, and I fell in love with ballet. And I also went to a Jewish community day school where, much like Chelsea shared, it was a very tight knit community, and there was a lot of affluence. We did not have. We were like the least affluent, in a sense. Like I was the poor kid in the school. And so all of this with the perfectionism, transgenerational trauma, and also the fact that eating disorders run in my family. My mother was one of 7 children, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. 2 out of her 3 sisters experienced eating disorders in their life. And I need to say this, like they didn't live close to me. They lived in Europe. And so I never knew them having an eating disorder. So it's not like it was a learned behavior. My dad has 1 sister, and she also experienced an eating disorder. So as far as genetics go, I was screwed. But we also know that genetics doesn't necessarily mean that it'll happen But for me, I had this, this perfect storm of things happen: the genetics, the co-occurrent anxiety disorder that many of us that experience eating disorders have as well. I had, these temperaments of perfectionism. Everything was black or white, all or nothing. And then I was a ballet dancer. And so all of these came together. And at the age of 11 and a half, I went on a diet just next to the other 10 girls in my ballet class getting ready for an audition. And for the rest of them, they, did what a lot of folks that experience disordered eating, they went on a diet. It worked for a little bit. They got tired, they went off. And for me, it became how I maladaptively coped with so much in my life. And so my eating disorder continued for over a decade. And what was so unbelievable was I fit the archaic stereotype of who and what eating disorders look like and who they affect. And yet the entire time I experienced an eating disorder, there was absolutely no intervention. Even at the age of 17 and a half, when I was on the cardiac care unit, and I was probably younger than by 50 years from other people. And our clinical director today at the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness was actually on staff at that hospital, fully knowledgeable about eating disorders, and they never connected the dots. And so for me, as I started the journey to recovery, and like Lucy shared so beautifully, like my journey to recovery was so messy. It was not linear. It was, one step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward. I realized how there could have just been a few different things along my journey that would absolutely have changed the outcome of my story. And so I was getting ready to go to graduate school. I had gotten into a PhD program, and something happened internally. And I thought, what I really want to do is I want to make a difference. I want to speak to that 7th grade me who felt like I didn't deserve to show up. I didn't deserve to take up space. I didn't exist to live. I wanted to educate my doctor and to say, it's right in front of you. This is what you can say. I also wanted people to know where to go for help and not to have the experience that I did. And I also wanted to go into a room where people spoke my language and said me too. And so for me, it was all of my story that really created really my passion and my mission for doing what I do today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just the lack of diagnosis, or of people being able to say, oh, that's an eating disorder, like that is so common. And that's my experience too. And eating disorders don't discriminate. They don't have a look. You can't, that's a myth, is that you can see it. You can't. And when I share my story, I talk a lot about, I was the typical eating disorder, and it was not, nobody picked up on it. I had the low bone mineral density and the lack of menstrual cycle, and the dieting and the control, and no one catches it. And that's why I, really want to just shed light on, eating disorder versus disordered eating versus body dysmorphia versus body shame. And all of those are all worthy of healing. Doesn't matter if there's a name to it or not. I feel like I need to say this over and over again, but if you have any type of body shame, it is worthy of healing, worthy of recovery, worthy of therapy, no matter what. So I just really wanted to highlight that.
Absolutely. That's so important.
Yeah. The other piece I would just love to highlight is the whole trauma piece in the Holocaust. And we say a lot like genetics loads the gun and then the environment pulls the trigger. But through my own work, I'm seeing so much of trauma adaptations are inherited and passed down through epigenetics. And so if, being Jewish and having ties to the Holocaust, whether or not you have a Holocaust survivor in your lineage, but just the collective trauma and the patterns that are passed down, actually can trigger an eating disorder. And if you know more or want to share more.
Yeah, no, for sure. We know, you're talking about epigenetics, and we know about neuroplasticity, that it literally changes your DNA. And I think that, it's really interesting how for me personally, how it showed up in my house, my space. My father very recently said to me, he's older and unfortunately he's nearing the end of his life. And he said to me, I've never been able to say I love you because I'm so afraid that I'm going to lose you because I've lost everyone else in my life. And it was really interesting because so much of my personal work through therapy was, I have this parent who is not capable of saying I love you, who's never given me a hug, who in my mind, and I think that for me, my eating disorder was so egocentric. It worked so well for me because I thought in my head, if I was smart enough, if I was capable enough, if I was thin enough, then maybe he will love me, maybe he will accept me, maybe he will hug me and tell me it's okay. Fully knowing that he's not capable of that because, he grew up without any family. He grew up, he literally for 3 years lived in a chicken coop, like in hiding. So he had none of those bonds, and how that changed the course of his life, which then changed the course of my life. But I think as like a collective group of people, like in Judaism, we have this always fear of this fight or flight. I think just as, as a rabbi said originally, it's just like, someone tries to kill us and then we move. And that's really, you feel it so much. It's there, but not even like that. You don't even know it, but it's there. So I think it's truly phenomenal. And I've only come into it very recently of realizing just how much transgenerational trauma has really played a role in who I am, and what my experiences have been. So without a doubt, it's definitely palpable. And I think in all of us.
Yeah, and I bring this up because just through my own journey and as I learn more about just feeling is, I didn't even know I had trauma. I was in therapy and my therapist goes, I think you have trauma. And I was like, no, I don't. And it's like humorous now, because of like in the genetic adaptations and epigenetics. So it's really fascinating. Again, this is a much bigger conversation. And I mentioned in the beginning, we are scratching the surface tonight. There's
Absolutely.
so much more. I would love for you, Joanna, to share just a little bit about just how, the impact of COVID-19 and then just tips and tools and resources for support, because I know that Alliance has a lot of support. I personally use some of your support groups, the Find ED Help app. So would love for you to share more for everyone else watching.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable that we're actually coming up on a year now since, the pandemic struck and has literally changed the course of our lives. So many of us have talked about how, this whole idea of, the impact of COVID on individuals that have experienced eating disorders, that are in recovery from eating disorders, that might at the beginning, be at the beginning of the development of an eating disorder. I think any one of us, even outside of the eating disorder world, can say that there is just this heightened amount of anxiety going on right now. One of the things I'm part of, this committee called the ISMIC, the Interdepartmental Serious Mental Illness Coordinating Committee. And, we had always thought that it was 1 in 4 individuals in this country have some sort of mental illness, but we now believe it's 1 in 3. And that's really where the number is going. I mean, we all have this collective anxiety that's going on. And for individuals with eating disorders, this whole idea of being socially isolated, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this idea of scarcity. So this fear around not being able to get enough food, or for some people, not being able to leave their homes and being very triggered by maybe too much food in their house. Not being able to see your therapist in person, your dietitian in person, doing everything virtually. But something that's been truly phenomenal, and that has really been like the North Star at the Alliance, is letting folks know that you can be physically distanced without being socially isolated. And there's a very big difference between that. And what I've been so impressed with our field in general is just how quickly everyone pivoted to meet the needs of folks that are experiencing eating disorders. Jocelyn, as you talked about, we have 21 in-person free weekly clinician-led support groups in cities across the country. And we got a call literally on a Friday night from shuls and churches around the country saying, you can no longer have your groups here. And we had never even imagined what a virtual group would look like. And we spent literally 48 hours trying to conceptualize it. And by that Monday, we launched our first virtual group. And I have to tell you, what a gift. There's been so many silver linings, so many gifts that have come up, like really terrible times. So we've pivoted all of our groups to now have 5 free weekly virtual support groups. We had over 9,000 people hop onto groups last year. And, you know, and people are hurting. People, like, the levels of acuity are unforeseen. We had 190,000 touch points last year, 108% increase from the year before in connecting people to care. So one of the things that I will share with those of you who are watching is, number one is, if you're experiencing an eating disorder, you're not alone. Recovery is also possible, and I think that that is so special. The fact that you have, you know, Jocelyn and Lucy and Chelsea, these were all folks of lived experience that are living our lives beyond our eating disorder. At the Alliance, we have our group, so we can definitely, you know, definitely check those out. We have 2 groups that are general eating disorder support groups, one group that is specifically LGBTQ plus focused, one group specifically for moms of individuals experiencing eating disorders, and then all loved ones. Something else that we have at the Alliance, and our numbers have just exploded, is at our headquarters in South Florida. We have a program where we offer very low cost outpatient care to folks that are underinsured or uninsured. So individuals that have experienced eating disorders for a very long time that have never had access to care. We've had that program for 4 years, and I will tell you, we are at max capacity with a wait list that is beyond comprehension. All that shows is that people are experiencing eating disorders, and they deserve access to care. They deserve treatment, because what so many of us have said tonight is that, you know, eating disorders are not a choice. Recovery and treatment is a necessity. It shouldn't be a luxury. And there are resources out there that can help connect you to care, like the Alliance, like NEDA. We're here to support you. And there's a lot of free and amazing resources out there.
Yeah. And just how would you say, how can you help support somebody maybe who isn't yet ready to attend a support group, but, like, let's say a family member has a loved one that they want to help guide to a support group or to therapy?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, first and foremost, educate yourself, but watch the resources you're getting educated with. Like, make sure that you go to, you know, valid sources. You know, one of the things that has been extraordinary with social media is that it's given this platform and made information very easy to connect to, but then that also means that it gives a platform to everyone. So you have to be very conscious, and also you have to curate what you're looking for. If you are a loved one of someone with an eating disorder, I would say definitely reach out for resources in your area where I cannot underestimate the necessity of family therapy or therapy for loved ones. Definitely hop on to one of our loved ones support groups. They're actually meeting right now. It's actually the first time since March of last year that I have not been on a group. So at this time, and speak to the person who you love. Make sure to use I statements. This is not about attacking them. It's not about shaming them. I will leave you with this is, you know, folks ask me all the time, if there was something that, you know, my loved one could have said to me when I was experiencing my eating disorder, what would it be? And my response is always the same thing. I would want someone to say, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. I can't even imagine how difficult it is. But please know that I love you and that I'm here for you, and I will do everything I can to help walk you through this journey. And know that it's, as a loved one, it's not on you to fix them, because you can't. People need treatment. This is not something that you can willpower away or push away. Just how you can't tell someone with diabetes or that has a physical ailment to just get over it or get better. People need access to care to recover from their eating disorder. So definitely learn more about it, get your resources, and get support. It's so important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Any last words of wisdom that you want to add before we wrap up?
I just thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for being part of this community. And more than anything, if you're experiencing an eating disorder, know that you're not alone, that you're not the exception to the rule. I think that that's something that I think all of us on this call that have spoken can relate to. It's like, yeah, everybody else but me. And I will share that, like I tell folks all the time, I ask them, what makes you so damn special? And I mean that with love, because we get to recover too. So just hang in there, know that there's help, know that there's support, and know that there's recovery. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your journey with all of us. And yeah, for everybody that's listening, I'm just going to echo all that Joanna said is recovery is real. It's possible. Ask for support. You're not supposed to do it alone. You're not supposed to do it alone. We all think that we can and we want to, but it takes a village. It really does.
Amazing. Thank you all. It has been incredible to see the comments in the chat thanking our speakers. Vulnerability is definitely something that was brought tonight, and the sharing of personal stories. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly empowering, and it really lets us see that, you know, we're not alone in this. We can reach out for help. There are resources that are available in or outside of the Jewish community. And we're grateful to everyone who joined us tonight in this program, people across the country, more people watching live on Facebook, and we know more people will too. So a few little comments to close us out, and then Lucy's actually going to give us a couple closing words here. Just thank you again for being here. And if you're watching with us live on Zoom, you will be receiving an email with the resources that were mentioned tonight and some other resources, links to Jewish mental health resources that are in the community of all denominations that we link to. And I want to leave you with something that Lucy's going to share with us. And it's a special Misha Berach that was actually written. And at the Blue Dove Foundation, we believe that Jewish prayers and rituals can help to strengthen our mental well-being, resilience, and recovery in the same way that Midot, or Jewish values, can promote them. Faith is an important part of healing, as we heard this evening from many, and Jewish thinkers and leaders historically have brought the two together. When someone is ill or recovering from illness or an accident, we often recite a Misha Berach to wish them a refuah shlimha, or a full recovery. The Blue Dove Foundation has taken this idea of Misha Berachs and adapted them in different variations for those who are struggling. So I'm excited to invite Lucy back. We heard her story earlier, who is going to leave us with a Misha Berach for eating disorders that she actually wrote. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And Lucy, close us out for this evening.
Yes, thank you everyone so much for coming. I was really proud to write this, and I originally did this with Foundation for Jewish Camp, and then did it with Waiter for Blue Dove, and it's a really meaningful experience. May the one bestow compassion and acceptance for all people, to restore their health and repair their bodies, to heal body, mind, and soul, so that they can rebuild their lives and recreate their self-perception, to allow themselves to rest, so that they may be strengthened and resilient to cope with life without feeling a desire to take it out on their bodies, to gain insight into the perfect storm of what caused their eating disorder, allowing them to heal mind, body, and soul. May the one help them validate themselves and realize that their self-worth is within them and has nothing to do with a number or size, so that they can live freely and have a renewed passion for showing up as themselves. May the one send them hope that recovery is possible and the understanding that healing is not linear, and provide patience with themselves and perseverance to keep going. And let us say Amen.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us. Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.